Hello, I am Harvey Bolofsky, the Senior Rabbi of the Golders Green Synagogue, and I'm really delighted to be here with you all today for a short share as part of a series the United Synagogue is presenting leading up to Shavuos. You can see from the banner at the bottom of the screen, I hope, that there is a source sheet that accompanies this presentation. You can see it there. It's www.theus.org.uk/lunch and learn. I will make it as clear as possible, but I think this show will be enhanced if you have access to the sheet where the sources appear in Hebrew and English. So if you haven't already downloaded them, please do so now. The banner will continue to roll during the share for those who join a little late, or in case you forget the URL. Now, the topic of my talk today is Moshe and the plight of the angels. And the share only has two sources. One, which is an excerpt from the Talmud. It's a very well-known story, and these stories need to be put in their context. I'm going to read the story, and I'll translate sections of it from the Hebrew, but then probably read most of the rest of it in English. The context is that midrashim of this sort are not to be understood literally. This is not describing a real event that you could go back in time and watch. This is describing, in a very sophisticated and carefully worded form, how the rabbis want us to conceive of the interrelationship between Moshe, the angels, God, and the Torah at a critical moment in history. That is the moment where Moshe goes up the mountain. And Moshe is conceived here by the rabbis, imagined as negotiating with the angels to receive the Torah. And from a Maimonidean perspective, from the Rambam's way of reading things, this is to teach us a set of important ideas, but not to be read literally. But in the meantime, it's a good story, so let's give it a go. I hope you have the source sheet. As I said, if not, then I will translate as we go along. And anyway, it's all in English for those who have the sheet. So we're reading a section from the Gemara in Shabbos, Daf Pei Ches on base. That's 88b, and it goes over the page to Pei Tes on Aleph, which is 89a. Here it goes. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said, when Moses ascended on high, the ministering angels said to God, Rabbona Shalom, Master of the universe, Ma liyalud isha beinenu. Why is one born of woman, we would say in English, why is one flesh and blood, a human being, here among us? This is the domain of the spiritual. This is the domain of God and his special advisors, the angels. So why is this guy here? Omalahen, so God said to them, Lekabel Torah bo. He has come to receive the Torah. Omulafonov, they argue. So they say before God, Chamuda Ganuza. It's a beautiful phrase. Chanuza Ganuza, which means a hidden treasure, something very desirable. That you conceal, this is the angels addressing God, 974 generations, before the world was created. You want to give it to one of flesh and blood, to a human being? What are you doing, God? By the way, the reference to 974 generations is based on a verse. Somehow or other, the Torah was given in the 1000th generation. If you count from Adam and Eve to the generation of Moses, to the giving of the Torah, there are 26 generations, and therefore, in some notional sense, the Torah was already existent for 974 generations. Now, there are various verses here that are quoted. Omala Kodesh Baruch, if you're following in the Hebrew text, it's on the fourth line. It's a few lines further down after the quotes from Psalms. Omala Kodesh Baruch la Moshe. So God now addresses Moses. Hechsil wahem teshuva. You reply. So God doesn't make it easy for Moshe. God doesn't respond to the angels. Moshe, what have you got to say about this? Why do you deserve to return the Torah? This great gift, it sits up in the heavens. I missed out the verses. And God said, Moshe, you justify. Why are you here to receive the Torah? Omelafonov. So Moshe spoke to God, Rabbona Shalom, Master of the universe, thereby reflecting the same kind of introduction that with which the angels had addressed God. I'm frightened they're going to zap me, that they will burn me with the vapor of their mouths. So Moshe said, I need some protection. Before I speak, before I try to argue with the angels, could you promise me some kind of protection from their wrath? Because I'm going to win. Omaloi. So God said to Moshe, "Achoz b'kisei kavodi, grasp my throne of glory, and then reply." Shinem, and it quotes the verse to justify this. Omalafonov. So we're a few lines down. If you're following in the Hebrew, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines down. Rabboni Shalom. So now he begins. He's grasping, as it were. He's holding onto the throne of glory, which offers him some kind of sacred protection. Bearing in mind, this is entirely imagery. This is not intended to be read literally. Omalahem. So he says to the angels, and this is the critical part of the text. Lemitzrayim Yeradatem. Did you descend to Egypt? Lefaroi Hish Tabatatem. Were you enslaved to Pharaoh? Rhetorical questions. Of course, the answer is no. Torah lomar tehilochem. So what do you need it for? What do you need the Torah for? The Torah is directed to people who went down to Egypt and suffered persecution and went through the crucible of development there, through the slavery to Pharaoh, and emerged. But you didn't do that. So what do you want the Torah for? Shuv Markasivbo. And now he continues in the same vein. He gets no answer and he carries on. Lo yelecho Elohim acherim. Doesn't the Torah say in the Ten Commandments, you should have no other gods? Do you angels live amongst the idolatrous nations who worship idolatry, that you need a law to tell you not to worship idolatry? Of course you don't. All rhetorical. Shuv Marcus. He's on a roll now, Moshe, as you can see. What else does it say there? Remember the Sabbath day to sanctify it. Do you do any kind of creative activity that you need to desist from it on Shabbos? Shuv Markasib, and so it goes on. Lo siso. So, right. It says, and if you look down, I'm just going to pick it up in the Hebrew, in the English text, for about 6 lines from the bottom. Do not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. Mean it's prohibited to swear falsely. Moshe asked the angels, do you conduct business with one another that may lead you to swear falsely? This is from the Safaria online translation, which is not a literal translation, it's interpolated so it's easy to follow. Again, Moses asked, what else is written in it? The Holy One, blessed be he, said to him, honor your father and your mother. Right? Each time Moshe says to God, what's in the Torah? God responds, and he says, well, look at the angels. Do you really think these things apply to you? Moses asked the angels, do you have a father or mother that would render the commandment to honor them relevant to you? Again, Moses asked, what else is written in it? God said to him, you shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal. These are all examples from the Ten Commandments themselves. Moses asked the angels, and if you're following in the English, I'm now on the top of the second page. Is there jealousy among you? Or is there an evil inclination within you that would render these commandments relevant? So it's fascinating. Immediately they agree with the Holy One, blessed be he, that he made the right decision to give the Torah to the people, meaning the angels concede. And as it is stated, I'm finishing in the English, God our Lord, how glorious is your name in all the earth. While that majesty is placed upon the heavens, is not written because the angels agree with God that it is appropriate to give the Torah to the people. So is it not written because the angels agree with God that it is appropriate to give the Torah to the people on earth? So the Hebrew text is very slightly different and slightly longer. So to summarize, the rabbis who want to paint a sophisticated and complex picture of the moment in which Moshe receives the Torah, imagine Moshe, and it is imagining Moshe in the following way. He ascends the mountain, and when he arrives, the angels say to God, what's this guy doing here? This is the spiritual domain. This is the place where ministering angels serve God. And yet there's this human being, a mortal, if you like, a Yulud Isha, one born of woman, we'd say a mortal or a human. Why is he here? And God says to receive the Torah. And they say, how, God, could you possibly imagine this precious, holy, eternal entity? How could you possibly consider it, giving it to this frail human being with all his flaws? And when God offers Moshe the appropriate reassurances that he'll be protected from their wrath, he then launches into an assault. He asks what the Torah will contain, and he gives about 7 or 8 examples of either context, slavery in Egypt, redemption, or laws, honoring parents, conducting business in a certain way, not worshipping idols, not stealing, not murdering, not committing adultery, all central laws of the Torah. And he asked the angels directly, do you live in a world where these laws apply? And they have no answer because the question's rhetorical. The answer is obviously no, in which case the angels concede and God gives Moshe the Torah. That, in a few sentences, is a summary of this extraordinary midrash. As always, a good midrash produces more questions than it answers. And we can't answer every possible question. Now, the point that I want to focus on, though, is a more systemic, existential question about this midrash, which is, if the angels didn't descend to Egypt and they didn't experience slavery to Pharaoh, and they don't work, so they don't have to keep Shabbos, and they don't have to swear because they don't do business, and they don't have parents, and they don't murder, and they don't commit adultery, and they don't steal, meaning none of these things are germane, why do they want it? That's the key question. It's a question the Gemara doesn't address. Why do the angels want to have? Is it pride? Is it a sense they want to maintain their proximity to God? And anyway, the reason I say the whole thing must be read as an allegory is because it's a principle in Jewish thinking that whatever angels are, some divinely created force, whatever they are, they don't have any free will. They don't have any free will. And so what's the nature of the question in the first place anyway? They are robots, entities designed to fulfill a particular task. So we have a fascinating, perhaps well-known story. You may well have heard it before. We've seen the source of the original, but we don't understand what it is the rabbis are trying to teach. What is the core message? I think the answer to that question lies in trying to answer the question why the angels want it in the first place. But to answer that question, we have to ask a different question, a question which is much more systemic to the entire nature of the Torah. And to do that, we're going to look at the second and final source. I do apologize. For some reason, it's labeled source 3. I don't know what happened to source 2, but there isn't one. But in source 3, which should be source 2, we see an excerpt from an essay by someone called Rabbi Shmuel Bornstein. Rabbi Shmuel Bornstein was the Rebbe, the Admor of Sokachov, or Sukashov, as it is said in Polish, which is a village about 40 miles west of Warsaw. He died in the late 20s, and his active period was from around 1910 to 1925. He was an intellectual from the school of Kotz, Pshischa. If these names mean anything to the audience, they're a very specific intellectual form of Polish Hasidus. And in an essay written in 5670, it's 103 years ago, this essay. So it's written in the spring of 1917. The Shem is Shmuel, as he's known. That's the name of a 9-volume work published of his essays. He asked the following question, and it takes you back to the story after the golden calf. You know the details. You've all seen the film. Moshe comes down the mountain. He's carrying the tablets, which he's intending to deliver to the Jewish people, to the Israelites. He sees what's going on, the golden calf. He hears a sound, which Joshua, his assistant, interprets for him. And in his anguish, wrath, fury, whatever you want to say, he smashes the tablets. The Jewish people look like they're going to be wiped out. There's a process of negotiation and reconciliation. And then Moshe goes up the mountain, according to tradition, twice more, for a further 40 days for negotiation to save the Israelites, and then for a third set of 40 days to receive the Torah anew. And then he returns with the second tablets on Yom Kippur. And if you're ever looking to understand the historical significance of Yom Kippur within the Bible narrative, it is the day in which Moshe delivers the second tablets and the message that God has forgiven from the golden calf, and it becomes, therefore, for all time, a day of forgiveness for the Jewish public. So that's the story. I'm not going to read all of this text, and I didn't translate it in full, but I did prepare some bullet points on the source sheet, and I hope they're helpful. But he encapsulates the question at the beginning. So we're looking at the right column, top text. As I said, I've culled, it's quite a lot longer than this, but I've got the bits we need. Vayishom im Hashem arboim yom va'arboim loilo. He was there with the Lord 40 days and 40 nights. And he wrote on the tablets the same text that God had written on the original tablets, because they're replacements. And he receives, it would seem, the Torah. It takes 40 days to transmit the Torah, clearly not just to write the text on the tablets. Yesh el hisboining. So Rabbi Shmuel Bornstein, the Shemesh Shmuel, asked the following question: Leis hisboining, lama chutzruch lismamea bahar gam bapam hazois arboim yoim. Why was it necessary for Moshe to remain on the mountain on this occasion again for 40 days? He'd already learnt the Torah in the first one. Has he forgotten it? He's already learnt the Torah for 40 days. It took him 40 days to learn whatever it means, the laws, the narrative, the esoteric concepts. We don't know exactly what it means that he was there for 40 days, what he was learning. But whatever he did it for 40 days. And has he forgotten it? So why does he need to go back? Now, that question seems only tangentially related to our longer Gemara text that we saw earlier. But if we bear with the Shemesh Shmuel, he's going to give us an idea, which I think is really interesting, which I think will enable us to properly understand the source above, source one. So he quotes the following, and again, I've already cut a piece out in the second paragraph. Venera al Pima de Isa Zohar Kodesh. He quotes a piece from the Zohar, the classic Jewish mysticism, although this concept also appears in the Gemara on a page very close to the one that we read above. The Shata de Kayamu Yisrael al Torah de Sinai. At the time when the Jewish people were at Mount Sinai, is Abar Minaihu Zuma. There, any kind of dross was removed from them. Taichivya, from the snake, and I'll explain in a moment what this means. Dargadein Bittel Yetzorah Hava Ba'alma, because the evil inclination was nullified from the world. V'dochale Minaihu, and it was pushed away from them. So what this piece in the Zohar means, and it has as a cognate in the relevant chapter in the Gemara in Shabbos as well, is that there's a rabbinic tradition that as they approach God, God somehow or other purifies them of any bad desires. Those desires enter the human being in the Garden of Eden. That's what happens when they eat from the tree, when they sin through the auspices of the snake. That's the reference to the snake. It's talking about the Garden of Eden story. And somewhere or other, whatever imperfections had entered them, they were wiped away as they stood at Mount Sinai. That's what it means. And it does imply, of course, from the story of our Gomorrah, that if the Jewish people asked, or Moshe asks the angels, do you have an evil inclination? The implication is that they do. So he goes backwards and forwards with this question. Do they have a desire? Do they not? Are they perfected? Are they not? But he uses the idea in the following way. This is the key part. We're on the third paragraph. But often there, in this way, and I haven't included the middle bit, but you'll see in a moment why it wasn't needed, because we can understand what he means from here. So we understand why the angels wanted to receive the Torah. That was our question on the Gemara. Why do the angels want it? And more importantly for us, this legend, whatever you want to call it, imaginative midrash, is trying to teach a lesson that's relevant in every generation, to every person who reads this Gemara. And we haven't got it yet. So let's ask the question, why do the angels want the Torah? Even though laws of business, laws of damages, torts don't apply to them. Why do you want a law book that regulates things that don't apply to your life? And he uses slightly mystical language, but we don't need to understand it in a mystical way. This refers to a manifestation of the Torah in a different guise. These guises are called manifestations of the Torah. Then he goes on for a bit of a tangent, but I'm going to stop to explain. What the Shemesh Shmuel is saying is that there are core concepts The Torah has a set of ethics, a set of values. Those values and ethics are to govern human behavior, human interaction. They're to govern how we create a just and functional society. They're to govern how we relate to God and experience spirituality, how we yearn for a better world and collaborate to bring that to being. The Torah is a set of very sophisticated ideas which are eternal. And when we read in the Gemara that the Torah existed for 1,000 generations before it was given, it means that those ideas were existential to the creation of the universe and perhaps its very purpose. But how they are manifest will depend on the context. The angels still have to, as a part of the world, be regulated by these ideas, but because they're angels, they need a different manifestation. They'll need a different version, if you like. Moshe wants a more earthly, more physical version of the Torah, which regulates the course and very physical issues and challenges that human beings experience. So what Moshe is saying is that, come on, guys, it is relevant to our world. It is relevant to our world. And a little further on, the Shlomo is going to explain, I'm going to come back to where we're up to, but look at the very last paragraph. This is the last paragraph of the Hebrew text, and there is a bullet point, I think, covering it as well. And I'm going to come back to the point we've just been making. Moshe has to understand something. When he returns to receive the Torah for the second time, why does he need to be there for 40 days? Because the world has changed. Remember the little first paragraph that said that they were cleansed, they became entirely spiritual, they moved to a different plane. Well, the Torah for people in that plane, a more angelic Torah, that's not the Torah that you need once you've sinned with the golden calf and you've descended to a normal life and you're going to have to now live in the world and process it and treat it in the normal way. So the Shem Mishmul says the reason Moshe needs to go back up the mountain is because while the ideas are eternal, while the ethics, the values, the aspirations, the pitfalls, they are all eternal, the manifestation has to be relevant to the circumstance. And it's a new world, new people, new circumstances, and hence Moshe needs to get a new Torah, the manifestation of the Torah, but not the ideas. And that's what he's saying in this final paragraph. Because when he went up the Torah, when he went up the mountain to receive the Torah, it would not be the same manifestation as he requires it now after the sin of the golden calf and God forgiving them. It will be in a more refined, a more spiritual version that was appropriate for the state that they found themselves in there. So the Shem Mishmul has answered his original question, but now we can go back and apply this idea and finish off where we started from. We already saw in the previous paragraph that the Shem Mishmul began to explain that the angels wanted the Torah in the guise that was suitable for them. So the question is answered. However, why then do they claim that Moshe shouldn't have it? Because, of course, they can't see his world. They see only their world. They see a Torah that works for them, but they can't see a Torah that works for Moshe. The point, however, that the Shem Mishmul finishes with is that Moshe wins the battle because in the end, we have free will. And because we have free will, and we can elect to do good or bad, and when we do good, some benefit accrues because it was a struggle, a challenge, a consequence of an informed and perhaps a difficult battle. And when we fail, the same thing happens sometimes as well. That means we fail, we don't pass the test, we don't get it right, and we have to bear the consequences. Because ultimately, to allow the Torah to be manifest in a world where there is free will, with all the pitfalls, all the things that go wrong, all the evil that free will can produce, that is still preferable to a world in which the angels will observe the Torah like robots. And so we've tied the ends together, but I think this has one or two other, let's say, off-piste consequences, which is the Torah is perhaps conceived in a more rigid sense often than has been portrayed in these sources. The Torah is a set of extremely sophisticated concepts which made it worth creating the world, for which God brought the world into being to be able to manifest, to create a good world. How do you define good? These are very big subjects. A just and functional society, a spiritual society, a meaningful society, an equitable society. These laws were intended to create and enable and facilitate that, ultimately for the whole of humanity, but initially for the Jewish people. Those concepts inhabit creation. They are the purpose of creation. And because there are different phases of creation, different types of creations, it will be necessary to have different manifestations. So the mystical sources, for example, tell us that when Adam and Eve are in the garden, they have very few responsibilities. In fact, they have to care for the garden, lo'ovdo ulashomro. It means to work it and to guard it. Say the sources. Lo'ovdo is to do positive things, and the Shomra is to desist from negative things. That is, if you like, an embryonic version of the Torah, a version of the Torah which is suitable for Adam and Eve in the garden. The same concepts, the same ethics, but a different manifestation for a different world. Then we have the revelation at Sinai. Then we have the second revelation, the second tablets, which, as we discussed, recast the Torah, manifested in a way that is appropriate for the post-sin world. For Rav Kook, who is almost a contemporary of the Shem Mishmur, although writing in a very different world, he came from a different part of Europe, but there are certain common heritages in their thinking. For Rav Kook, the concept, which he calls Torah Shabbal Peh, the orally transmitted ideas, they are the Torah, they are the most important thing of all. And it ensures that they are able to remain live, relevant, and fresh in every time, in every generation, and in every circumstance. And the challenge of receiving the Torah anew each year is to be able to hear the manifestation of the Torah with all its laws, with all its restrictions, with all its regulations, and see something fresh and relevant that's appropriate and accessible for our times. And what this source, the Gemara, which has been interpreted indirectly by the Shem Mishmul, is telling us is that the angels don't understand this. The angels don't have the situational flexibility because, after all, they're robots. They're wind-up forces that do something that God says without any mind of their own. The greatest blessing of all is to be an agent with free will, to have the ability to make free will choices and yet have the blessing of the Torah. So I wish you all a wonderful Yom Tov. And I hope these ideas are somewhat helpful to understanding how to read a difficult midrash, but giving it a sophisticated overlay using a remarkable early 20th century commentator, but also to realize that the core message the Gemara is conveying is that the Torah is a set of sophisticated and eternal ideas, and they have to be manifest in a way which is relevant, germane, and appropriate within the system, and therefore can, no matter whether we're a year or 3,500 years from that moment of revelation, they are illuminating, enlightening, and developmental for us all. Good Yom Tov. Now, I'm just going to have a quick look to see whether any questions have arisen since we began. If there are any questions, I think there is a way in which you can send them. So I'll wait a minute or two. No, none have arrived so far. Right, I'm receiving a message from the technical room that there aren't currently questions, in which case I'm going to sign off. I hope you can find something useful to do in the remaining 15 minutes. And have a good day and a wonderful Yom Tov. Chag Sameach. Thank you.